and thank you for joining us for this amazing webinar today. We have an excellent panel lined up, and I am excited to share that with you. Before we get started, just a couple quick announcements. We have the Elite 50 Internships program is announcing the top insurance internships this coming Monday, February 15th. Take a look on our website for the announcement. If you aren't a RISE member already, you can join. It's riseprofessionals.com. And then for future webinars, you can check out our events calendar. Tons of opportunities coming up, scholarships, things like that. So without further ado, if you have questions during the webinar, feel free to put them into the Q&A section, or the chat. We'll be checking them at the end, and we'll address those at the very end. And so today, joining me, I have Greg Tacchetti, who's Chief Information and Strategy Officer for State Auto Insurance, Cole Winans, who's CEO and founder of Flyreel, Chris McLeod, who is a Claim Director at the Auto Club Group, and Melissa Hill, who is Enterprise Claims Data and Analytics at American Family Insurance. Today, we're going to be talking about the digital acceleration during COVID, and then also about what's here to stay. So to go ahead and kick it off today, we want to talk about what are some of the operational roadblocks that hold up the adoption of technology. Greg, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Hi, Amy. Thanks. So I've, in my career, almost 30 years now, I've been at big companies like Geico and Safeco and Fireman's Fund, and done startups, and now part of the turnaround at State Auto. I think the thing that really gets in the way of technology roadblocks, as it will, is more organizational. And you know, one of the things I joke about with State Auto is it's the perfect size company. It's got enough capital to go through a major digital transformation, and small enough that you don't have a lot of fiefdoms and really valid competing interests around business priorities. So we attack this problem holistically with one mind as a senior leadership team, and I think that's been the real secret to our success.
Yeah, and Cole, can you also speak to that? Because I know that from your perspective, you must see that as well.
Yeah, I would say that the organizational dynamics play a huge role in the ability to effectively adopt technology, but also it's how well instrumented the carrier is as basically a partner to a technology company. Are they willing and able to experiment in sandbox territories to basically prove out new models, understand the value, without kind of taking the core function of the organization off track? And so what we've seen are organizations that are starting to invest more in constructs that are more accommodating to testing, trying, and implementing new technologies, and those groups tend to have a really good advantage.
Yeah, and then Melissa, I know that you've been doing a lot in your new role at American Family. Have you seen that, or can you talk to that from your past experience?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things have changed, obviously, since we hit COVID, but even before COVID occurred, you saw a lot of the carriers, you know, large, small, medium, regional, start moving to what I call the more technological, digital, virtual space, right, and handling property claims. And, you know, there's some roadblocks in the sense that different carriers, depending on their size, have legacy issues. They have bad data, they have old systems that don't work with the new systems, but you're trying to get into this virtual space, right? And you're trying to work with these insurtechs and use these tools that give you the ability to do things faster and smarter in a digital way to get the customer paid faster, right? The ultimate goal is obviously to issue that check much faster than we do today without compromising, right, some of that human touch. So, you know, as we have thought about it, and as I joined American Family, we were trying to figure out, how do we go from sending out that field adjuster to that virtual desk very quickly? Because traditionally, American Family has always sent the adjuster out, right? They had an entire force of field adjusting staff. And when COVID hit, they had to learn how to do that really quickly in the virtual space. And we've been investigating lots of different tools. Some worked, some didn't. And we just, we weren't that good at implementing a lot of them. So we've learned along the way that we need to do this a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And COVID did change a lot of that landscape. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit too about what changes you saw after COVID hit in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything that everyone else talked about, but I think one of the biggest things is, from a technology standpoint, is how does it potentially integrate with your claim management system, and do you have the means to do that, or are you going to stand it up outside that? And do you have the IT resources available to take the technology and integrate it? But we had to, obviously when the pandemic hit, people didn't want additional people coming inside their house. So how can we virtually adjust that loss? And I think, much like Melissa, we traditionally had put adjusters inside a home, and how do we do that, protecting the employees, protecting the customers as well. So I think you have to leverage whatever resources are out there, and whether it's adopt new technology or technology you already have. And I think we've learned to adjust, and I think in the end, like we'll talk about coming up, there's things that are going to stay, and things that might only be temporary, and it's based upon what the needs are of the company and the claim department.
Yeah, absolutely. So did anybody else wanted to add to some of the changes that they saw post-COVID? I don't know. Cole, I'm sure that your phone started ringing more, right?
Yeah, I think the way I say it is groups that had digital strategies in place for things like self-inspection or remote claims adjusting fared pretty well. And then those that didn't have those strategies all came up with them very quickly and got pretty busy. So in general, I like to wear the optimist hat and believe that it was a forced digitization that was well overdue. And the outcome of this will be a much accelerated improvement for the customer experience. I think customers have wanted these next generation solutions, the ability to self-serve and get that really white glove touch from a technology perspective for a while. And the market needed an excuse to get busy and launch that. And COVID provided that. So I'm pretty optimistic and hopeful that out of this will be kind of this acceleration of improved customer experiences. And that's what we've seen. I've been actually amazed at how adaptive so many carriers have been and responsive they've been to customer needs at this time, and partnering and structuring accordingly.
Yeah, and you just said something that I think is really important, which is just touching on policyholders and their ability to self-serve. And so just to spin it back at you, what do you think are some of the factors that actually motivate policyholders to want to engage in self-serve beyond COVID?
Yeah, well, it's been really interesting for us. We have a different vantage point getting to see the policyholders and their interactions with technology across over 20 different carriers now as our customers. And what we've seen historically in insurance or insurtech is when insurtech first kind of came to market, everyone was focused on the same thing, speed, right? How do we turn this into a one-click, no-touch process? And that's predicated on the assumption that the customers don't want you to interact with them. They just want the insurance, set it, forget it. They're actually buying coverage. They're buying protection, and they're buying peace of mind. So then the question comes, are they actually a willing partner? Will they take their phone for 10 minutes, scan the home, scan a claim to make sure that they're adequately covered or they're getting the result that they should? And the answer is a resounding yes. And so I think that's one of the big aha moments that we've seen, is that the customer experience doesn't have to anchor solely to speed. You have customers that really want the peace of mind and knowledge that their homes and their property are adequately protected, and they're willing to trade 10, 15 minutes with their smartphone to do that. And it's also in alignment with other consumer grade products that they're using today for transportation and more. So it seems inevitable that this trend will continue.
Yeah, and I know when we were talking before, Melissa, you had said that you had some challenges, maybe with your policyholder base. Could you talk to some of that and maybe what you've seen that has worked?
Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest challenges for American Family and American Family specific customers are these are long tenured customers. You know, they've been with American Family for 10, 15 years, 20 years, which just doesn't happen with most insurance companies. They have a very loyal policyholder base. So then you fast forward and American Family buys HomeSite, they buy Connect, we own the General, they buy MFA. These are very different demographics, very different people, very different subsets of who wants insurance and how they want to buy insurance and then how they want the claim handled. So as we integrate and bring together all of these companies and bring together the claim service, we're trying to figure out, all right, how do we balance this? I want to have self-service, the digital app to, no, I would really prefer to call somebody. I would prefer to talk to somebody, because a lot of them, you know, file their claim through the agent, and maybe we give the agent the tool versus the customer the tool, right? But we're still using the tool, right? Trying to figure out how to work through that process. So it is somewhat of a balance, but I would say even our long tenured customers, they do want some type of self-service. They're just not quite sure what they want or how much they can actually handle. It depends on the product. So those are the things we have to navigate, right? And you need to really do some test and learn and talk to your customers and not assume they want a certain way to do things. And I think to Cole's point, as you know, his tool at Flyreel is fantastic, because I think a lot of what you get up front, we could carry over into claims. We already have it. So when a claim gets reported, we don't have to ask those 50 questions. Here, send me this, do that, and go through this whole customer journey of getting all of this information. We already have it, right? So we can actually reach out to them and say, oh, we already have this, we know this, and then, you know, adjudicate the claim accordingly, or even do straight through processing. So there's a lot of things we can do, but we have to figure out the human component of this process, because it can't be completely no human touch, right? And that's just going to be a balance.
Yeah, and it's always about striking a balance. And so I know, Greg, that you had done the last, I guess, 5 years an internal transformation. Can you talk to us too about some of these external factors of working with the policyholders?
Yeah, so just to level set, we started when I got here a little over 5 years ago with a complete rebuild of all of our core systems, and we're getting to the end of that now. So we've got 14 statutory lines in the new platform. But you know, bringing this to what we're talking about, there's all different shapes and sizes of customers, and they, to agree with a number of the points that have already been made, have different desires and expectations, some of which are fashioned on experiences in other industries. You know, call it whether you want to call it the Amazon effect, or you know, being able to have real-time data and experiences for some clients, some customers, is absolutely table stakes. And so for us, when we started on this 5 years ago, that it was really designing to the most difficult customer, if you want to think about it, or the most difficult use case, making sure all of your data was real time and harmonized and with the right dimensionality, so that you could ingest whatever data it was and serve up whatever experience it was based on those different personas. And so we very intentionally embarked on a strategy 5 years ago to get to where we are today, and allows us to work with, you know, great companies like Cole and Flyreel and a variety of other companies, always trying to be very experimental and very open to the honest answer, which is we don't know. You know, we don't know what customers will and will not want. So having an architecture that lets you experiment quickly, learn from those failures, and hopefully, and most likely, there'll be a lot of them, and then pivot away from the ones that don't work, ingest the learnings, and get into the next set of experiments. Most companies, that's really hard to do, because the the initial investments are so big to do an experiment, and so if you architect everything right, you can do that at very low cost and at high velocity. And that's kind of where we are. So COVID didn't really impact us other than changing some priorities on bringing some cyber tools in for endpoint that we didn't need prior to COVID. But the customer side of this equation in insurance is definitely confounding. I think the largest marketing category in the US still is auto manufacturers, and I think the second one is auto insurance. So for $300 billion in auto insurance premiums, there's a whole lot of advertising to buy mind share because no one knows when someone wants to buy insurance. And that's just, the reality of the world that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So as data is driving a lot of this, and like you were saying, the data we wish we had, and as we were talking a little bit earlier, some of the data we wish we could aggregate. What do you think are some of the risks, and what do you think are some of the rewards as we are accelerating so quickly? We're incorporating all this data. What do you think we're hoping to gain, and what are some of the risks along the way?
Well, you hear the term digital exhaust a lot, and how much data has been created in the last 2 years relative to all of human history. Those are all interesting statistics. The reality is there's a lot of data being generated, and the potential costs are, particularly if you're not in a cloud world and you're buying all that hardware to store all that data, it can get pretty expensive, knowing that you're going to be storing a lot of stuff that ends up not getting used. So the challenge to me on the data side really is always working backwards from, what would your ideal state look like? What problems are you trying to solve? And, whether that's, hey, I want to build a completely telematics-based auto product. I'm trying to solve for getting to the future. There will be a myriad of examples that I believe will come to light in the next 5 years because of data. If you think about the business we're in, it's assessing risk and then trying to come up with the right rate for that risk. That's why, Flyreel's got a great tool. You never could have really understood, like looking at my bookshelf behind me, how much content someone might have in a house. But if you give a customer the ability to do that, not only have they now captured that record of what was in that house on a certain day, you've now given yourself the ability to price your homeowner's coverages very differently. It's not a percentage of your CovA, which to me is always kind of bananas, So I think, the companies that are good about understanding data and understanding how that data relates to risk will find better ways to price and structure products that will help the whole ecosystem. It'll help on the pricing side and the risk segmentation side, and it'll help on the claims adjudication side, adjustment side, because you're going to have more data up front to be able to serve up a better experience. I mean, if you think about the biggest complaint in insurance, right? It's, I thought I was covered for X, right? Yeah. And look, it's the four corners of a legal agreement that no one can explain until you have that unfortunate event. But through data, I think you can more personalize that experience and get in front of some of these things more quickly. And there's a bunch of ML components and everything else that are in there that, again, are driven by data.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you were just mentioning Flyreel, and Cole, do you want to talk to us about how you're using data and then maybe some of the things that you've run into and how you're solving for them?
Sure. Yeah, I think that as we've graduated as a business and started to scale, we've solved for different problems. When we first went to market, the issue was predominantly answering to the problem that carriers hadn't necessarily seen the homes that they were insuring, and they needed visibility. Just get us visibility into these homes. And I think out of that problem came the concept of self-inspection. And there are mobile photo taking apps. There are the browser apps where you upload photos from your camera roll. But when you start to do that at scale, your OpEx goes through the roof. You have to staff with underwriters that are looking at every single photo and extracting the information to glean the insights to then act from an underwriting perspective appropriately. And so that kind of fed into the advancement of our solution, where we gave the automation side using computer vision to look from the lens of an underwriter or an inspector. So what we're able to do, and what we're seeing in terms of data in action, is that at a large scale now, with the coupling of computer vision and the self-inspection solution, carriers can get automatically an understanding of attributes that could lead to ineligibility, that could present a critical risk or hazard. I think one of the big ones we catch are recalled circuit breakers. And one of the things that's fascinating about that, though, is the sentiment from the customer when that happens, and how they actually will come in and how often those circuit breakers will be replaced because they genuinely didn't know. And so there are some really interesting and exciting data advantages that are coming to fruition that even we didn't necessarily anticipate, that also don't just benefit the carrier, but benefit the customer directly.
And Melissa, you're dealing with data more from the claim perspective. Can you talk about how you're using it now and some of the risks and rewards that you've experienced?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, just for the audience here, so I've been in claims for 27 years. I was a trainee handling all kinds of claims. I used to drive around for you young people with a paper map with a highlighter and telling me where I need to go and climb roofs. I didn't have an iPhone. I didn't have a Google Map. And, I've stayed in the industry for a long time, started out in the paper world. I've transitioned into the digital world, taught myself a lot about data and analytics, asked a lot of smart IT people what all this means and how it works, and, came to really enjoy data and analytics on the operational side. So, I took this position knowing that I could have an impact and influence the industry as well as the company, because I do know claims and I've handled all lines of business. I know how it works. I know how adjusters think. I know how most customers think. Like I've been in the trenches for many, many years. And normally you have a very IT data science person running this, but I'm more of the business side of the person. And then I have all the IT data science folks working with me in this process. So, American Family being a big company, we were using the AWS Lake, and there's nothing wrong with AWS at all, but we decided we needed to go to cloud, right? So now we're in the Google Cloud, we're building a brand new platform. I own the claim data, I own how we architect it, I own how the data comes in, how it goes out, because we have so much data, but we don't know what to do with it, because not all data is equal, right? And we need to understand what to use the data for, how to tag it, how to architect it. How do we then turn around and push it out? How do we use it for the customer experience, right? And then how do we start developing the unstructured data into structured data, right? This is one of our biggest challenges, right? We have a lot of structured data. And when I say structured data, for the audience, it's, things that you input, your date of birth, policy number, claim number. That's a very structured data. But for those of you that handle claims, what about all these rich claim notes? Right? We write a lot of activity notes and write all kinds of great stuff, right? I love adjusters' minds, but how do we take that and turn that into structured data so that we can get insights that are actionable insights, and we start making changes and we understand product, we can rewrite the policies, like all of the things that we need to do to make this industry much more user-friendly. I mean, no customer can read a policy. You hand it to them and they're like, what the heck does this thing say? I mean, and I read it for a living and I still have trouble reading the policy and trying to figure it out. So I can appreciate, being a customer trying to understand it, but I want to capture all that data, right? And claims data is so rich because we can push it back out to underwriting, to product, to actuary, to loss reserving, right? Even back out to our insurtechs, right? If we could send some of this back out to Cole in his world, he could really develop his product, right? So trying to figure out how to harvest that data and put it in that mindset. So one of my biggest challenges in taking this role is I have very IT technical data science people, and then I have business claims people. And I'm trying to mush their minds together so that we can all cross-pollinate, right? And think about things in a very different way. And, you know, it's been fun. It's challenging because they think very differently, but we're having a lot of fun doing it. And I think if we can get to that point as an industry and everybody understands how data can help you, it's not always the be all end all, it's the tool to get to the outcome, right? We're not going to be robots. Artificial intelligence isn't going to take over things. It's going to help us, right? It's the tool, and we will continue, you know, to move forward with that tool, but we have to understand how to use it. And then we need to be very good stewards and responsible with that data, because we do not want to make algorithms and create things that people don't understand that might discriminate against somebody, or it might do something like, so, you know, I take that very seriously in this role and try to make sure that we are very good stewards of the data and how we're using it. Because you do have a lot of personal information from people, right? I mean, I could probably take all this data and understand everybody's lives and what they do and how they do it, right? I mean, I can still get it without the data just because that's what we do in claims, but with the data, you can figure that out even more. And, you know, so that's our challenge, right? As leaders of the industry and companies come in, we have to be responsible in how we act, but we also need to get the data and let's use it for good, right? And really help understand how insurance works and write the risks and take more risks. As far as I'm concerned, give people more coverage. Let's be broader with that coverage, right? So that we can add more to the ecosystem, right? Of the economics and how the world works. So as you can tell, I love my data and analytics. I love it. I'm very passionate about it.
The more we know, the more we can undertake, that's for sure. And isn't that challenge with your team the challenge we have in the industry, is just bringing it together. Chris, can you talk to us from your perspective at Auto Club Group and what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably started in the industry around the time that Melissa did. And I mean, it's amazing how the industry has come, you know, from what it used to be. You know, I used to drive down the road and write estimates with pen and paper and look up unit costs with the old book. And now here we are. Suddenly we rolled out laptops and adjusters are writing estimates in the car and printing off an estimate and handing it to the customers or handing checks. But, you know, the industry has come full circle and continues to pivot based upon the needs. You know, but it's about data, and it's adjusting as data collection and decision making. And I think the industry is going away with adjusters doing the data collection, whether it's the member or some third party or an Uber driver, who knows who it's going to be, and then leave the decision making up to the adjusters, take in that data and make the best decisions from there. I mean, but, you know, there's challenges with that. You know, there's legal environments are always going to poke the bear, and you know, you're going to deny a claim, you know, where you didn't put any boots on a roof. That's going to get attacked. So, you know, there's a niche, and you have to understand your customers. You have to understand the legal environment and make the best decisions you can in order to get that data. But, you know, there's absolutely a lot we can do with it, and we continue to do it. So we're testing the different technologies and leveraging what's already available. You know, it's amazing how much data is available in the public records that adjusters don't even know, and is available to help steer you in the right direction. The internet is a scary place. It's a great place, but it's a scary place.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna ask you all for you know, to rub the magic ball and make a prediction for me and tell me which of these changes that we're seeing do you think are going to be here to stay post-COVID? And I'm going to start with you, Melissa.
Oh, fun. Well, we know remote working is staying, and we're all going to live on Zoom forever, right? We're all going to have true Zoom fatigue as we work through this. You know, I do think the industry has pivoted from that we can work remotely, right? We obviously need to have a balance and a hybrid of that and still have the human interaction, but I think we can effectively do it. So I think that, you know, we pushed out, in 6 months, what it would have taken 10 years for our industry to get fully remote. Now, claims had somewhat been ahead of the rest of the industry. But, what I think is here to stay besides remote working is, I think we're going to increase our diversity within our industry, and we're going to start hiring people that are not necessarily always insurance people, right? I like to get perspectives from all walks of life, different industries, and we bring people into this industry from a varying backgrounds. I think it will only help the industry get more what I call less financially Wall Street kind of, demographic, right? That's my best way of being politically correct when I say this. And I've been in the industry a long time, so I can say that because I've been doing this a long, long time, and I've watched it evolve. But I think the more diverse we can get, and the more we start going out into industries that are not, what I call risk management or financial, we're just going to get a better subset of people. We're going to get smarter. We're going to get better. I mean, we could be the Amazon effect in 4 to 5 years, right? So we've got to get different people and different mindsets. And it's not always, I know we have legal issues and we've got litigation. Like, I get all of these things that happen in the insurance industry, but I think it'll force us to change if we get much more diverse in our thought and bring in, just completely different mindset. And it's not always legal. we have a component of it, but let's start really pushing that envelope. Let's challenge our regulators, right? Let's really get into that. I think if we keep doing that, this pandemic has helped that. I think it has allowed us to equalize some of the workforce in the industry. So I see a lot of positive things coming out of the pandemic. I understand, there are horrible deaths and people were sick. Like, I get all of that. But from an industry standpoint, it's pushed us to be much better stewards of just the world as opposed to living in our little insurance industry bubble, right? So that's what excites me, and I think it's here to stay.
Yeah, thank you. Greg, what do you think is here to stay?
I think there's some pieces of the world that will never change. I think I've always said the insurance industry is fascinating and that it's so complex. I've called it for years the kind of shock absorber of the economy. You think about a multi-billion-dollar weather event, and if you didn't have insurance there, those businesses and homes would never get rebuilt, and you'd never have another loan to build them in the first place. So I think that's here to stay. I agree with Melissa. I think this Zoom type world isn't going away. I think we'll move to hopefully a more hybrid model where we're somewhat in person, but I don't see going back to the proverbial 9 to 5, 5 days a week in the office world. The things that I see changing, I know that wasn't your question, but if you look at, we talk about data, but it's not just data for the sake of data. It's data and integration that I see as broader trends. How companies are able to integrate and interface today is very different than when kind of EDI first was born 40 years ago. So that trend, I think, is a long-term trend that COVID kind of kicked in the rear and made go a lot faster. And I see that as being a trend that's going to be more prevalent going forward. The companies that are able to interact at high speed with each other are going to separate from the folks that are still trying to figure out how to get a daily batch cycle out of their mainframe.
Yeah, I happen to agree with you on that one. Chris?
Yeah, I think the future is you're going to see, every carrier have to have a different approach for the different demographics. And, I'm in Florida, and, this is God's waiting room. And so we know that the older generation are not as tech savvy. So, I struggle getting my mom to use her iPhone. Am I going to expect my mom to use that tool to help adjust her claim? Probably not. So, but, my next policy holder might be someone who's 27 and absolutely wants to buy into the technology. And, I think obviously there's going to be some expectation that there's going to be some premium reduction. for that customer to be involved in the process. But I think carriers are going to have that suite of options available to the customer, whether it's, property, or whether, it's an auto FISDAM, whatever it may be. I mean, customers get into accidents, and, the expectation is that, the 17-year-old son's going to go out and take the pictures with his cell phone, and suddenly they're going to have an estimate, 2 hours later. So you have to offer the different options based upon your clients.
Yeah, that is something that the industry will definitely need to be moving towards. And Cole, I'll end with you.
I think that here to stay would be the changes in methods for data acquisition. Realizing that boots on the ground compared to utilizing technology, mobile technology in particular, to get the same or even better data is one of the nice realizations that we've kind of come out of COVID with. I think downstream, though, is a bit similar to what Melissa was touching on. Is you have all this data, so what does that do? So if you're getting better capture of data in a more mobile, detailed way, full interior, exterior on homes, those types of things, what does that do in terms of the actual insurance product itself? Can we actually achieve the policy of one, where based on the unique risk profile of that property, we can hyper-personalize the pricing and now have better risk selection, better pricing, and really optimize the book as a whole. And we're just not there yet, but I'm starting to see the amalgamation of kind of data acquisition coming into formation that will make way for things like this. I mean, Melissa talking about going to GCP and basically data coming out of these platform silos where you have a claims installation and an underwriting installation. And if you could just use those data points in tandem to complement each other, what does that do? And I'm starting to see some groups scratch the surface of that. And that has me pretty excited for the future.
That's excellent. And it actually leads, I have a few questions from the audience that we're going to go into. And one from Eric asked, does the information obtained by Flyreel at policy inception move directly into a claim determination when a loss occurs? It was like your prediction, just right there.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of gets into how the carriers use it. I know that with Flyreel, we get this comprehensive baseline record, interior, exterior of the home, and some carriers have instrumented their systems so that when a claim comes in, it surfaces that full comprehensive scan so they can do a before, after. And like Melissa said, you don't have to ask them 50 questions. You can virtually almost stand in that room. And we've seen the benefits of that kick in particular for, most recently, one of our high net worth carriers experienced a total loss due to a wildfire, and they had 15 minutes of comprehensive video of that home. So then you don't have to pick up the phone and make that poor policy holder close their eyes and communicate to you what the nursery looked like, how many towels they had, those types of things. And so you talk about improving customer experience. I mean, that's a great example. So in short, some carriers are doing that now. We hope to partner with them to make that easier to do, so it's not so much on their plate. And it's a great point in terms of ways to better use that value.
Yeah, thank you, Cole. And so back to the bigger conversation, a question from Mark. Will the changes discussed be internally driven or driven by external factors, startups, the next crisis? Can the industry lead, or will it continue to be a technology follower? So I'll kick it to the panel to answer. And do you agree that we're a technology follower?
Well, I can
I
kind of
think
take that
in a lot of ways
we
we're all
we are
technology.
yeah, we are, right? Aren't we?
Yeah.
Right, we are technology followers. But I will tell you, one of the things that I like about American Family is, they got their ventures group. We have a whole strategy team now. We are trying to make ourselves not follow. We're trying to actually be the leader. It's going to take us some time, right, to get to that. and figure out how to do that, because I do think we're still going to follow some. We learned some from the insurtechs. We learned some from just technology companies. Like, you know, we're big borrowing and stealing. I mean, that's what the industry does. And so we're trying to get ahead, right? We want to try and get ahead of that and actually lead that and be on the forefront of what I would call the really customized customer experience, right? This is what Cole was talking about. But really getting it to not just property, but to auto, to any type of insurance you buy. So if you're a customer and you have 4 or 5 different types of policies with us, right? Maybe you have a homeowner's policy, an auto policy, but you also own a small business and you have a BOP policy with us, right? So you have these 3. How do you get to the portfolio view of that customer? So when they file a claim, you already know what they want and it's already customized to them, right? And you use that through the digital process, through different tools like Cole has with Flyreel. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, but you got to put it all together so that it meshes and integrates, right? The key is integrating all of this and taking all that data and making it all work behind the scenes. You know, I think we can do that as an industry. We have the data. So this is the funny thing, and I always say this, is we're risk adverse as an industry, but we write risk. So we don't want to take our own risk, right? So I'm always like puzzled by that thought and always trying to push people beyond that, right? So, you know, it's an interesting time that we're in, and I'm excited, you know, to be part of it. And I think anybody that's coming out of college or, you know, and wanting to start in an industry, you know, I can't tell you enough how great this industry is. I mean, it's fed me and my family and paid for college. You know, it weathers the storms, right? You know, it hasn't always been the easiest, but it weathers the storms, and I've met amazing, great people, and it's just been, you know, it's just been a wonderful journey. That's why I never left it, right? I'm one of the few rare claims people that are still in claims after all these years and stuck with it. But, you know, I enjoy it, right? So, you know, it's a good industry. We just have to be better stewards of changing it, right, and pushing it forward. I think we can.
And Greg, you wanted to also give your opinion on if you think it's going to be driven internally or externally?
I think it'll be a hybrid, you know, it kind of is company by company. But the second part of the question about, you know, technology follower leader, I mean, let's be practical. You know, 99% of companies aren't inventing silicon chips or cameras or iPhones. So almost all of us are followers. It's really the business application of technology that I think is going to separate the pack.
Okay, and did anyone else want to add a comment before I go to the next question?
I absolutely agree with Greg. I mean, you're going to have carriers that are going to be light years ahead of other carriers. And I think in the end, the industry is going to be kind of right in the middle as an average. But I think we're going to be much more ahead of where we've been historically with all these tech startups that have flocked the market. And, you know, inevitably, we're gonna be much more well positioned to continue in the future than we have been historically.
Thanks, Chris. We had another comment / question from Karen, which also goes back to Chris, your prediction about segmenting. So ironically, different generations want different tools and different service levels. But how are we going to address everyone's desires? Can you just talk a little bit more about how you envision segmenting and kind of what that will do for the business?
I'm sorry, was that a question for me?
Yeah, for you or for Greg, either. Just talking about the segmenting and segmenting different customer groups.
Okay, I'll jump in, Chris, if you want to go, that's fine.
Sure.
For us, this is huge. You know, we sell through independent agents, and you know, whether it was Safeco or Fireman's Fund, a lot of the independent carriers I've been with tended to treat agents more monolithically. And I think that's the same problem, you know, when you deal with a lot of your systems builds, You don't give yourself the architectural flexibility to tailor the experience. I think this was kind of the comment Melissa was getting at with personalization earlier, to really have different personas and vary the experience based on your analytics of what that persona is looking for. Chris was talking about his parents. My father's 83 and I do Zooms on his iPad. He's been using his iPhone and he digitized all of his life 20 years ago. So it's not just an age issue. There's very different use cases and expectations and personas. And if you are good about ingesting that telemetry and serving up the experience that meets that persona's needs, they're going to choose you more than an experience that they like less. I always use the example of Amazon. It probably gets used too much, but my teenage daughters, I think, look at very different things when they log on to Amazon than I do. And that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Greg. And so I have another question over here. How can startups and big insurance best work together? And Cole, I'll let you give us your opinion.
Yeah, I think having gone through a number of experiences with different types of carriers, different sizes, different constructs, I think that the ones that work best are the ones that are a little bit better instrumented for taking controlled risks. And I think what we've seen is innovation arms are one thing, but if the innovation arms aren't actually working in collaboration with the business unit, it ends up being kind of a dream territory and none of that gets implemented. What insurance startups need is access to domain expertise. And what carriers need is access to the greatest and the best of today's technology. And so if you can agree on those fundamentals and be honest with each other in terms of what you need from each other, then up front and manage those expectations, I find that even with huge carriers and small carriers, you're able to work particularly well. I'm not able to beat Chris, Melissa, or Greg in anything insurance related. They could school me any day. But when it comes to behavioral analytics, the user experience, artificial intelligence, that's what I'm supposed to bring to the table to them. And so I think when you can strike that balance, you can develop relationships that work. And also, you just manage the expectations of what each group should be contributing to deliver success in the end.
And did someone from our panel want to give it from the insurance company side?
We do a lot with different startups, and my advice that I give fairly frequently is be professional in your trade. We run into a lot of startups who have a great idea, and there's a good bud there, but they don't have good cyber practices, for example, and that's just a non-starter in our world, right? I mean, you cannot expose yourself through an integration to somebody who's got weak security practices. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody at a startup say, "Oh no, Amazon does my security," or Google does my security. So that's probably my big advice. There's always a great passion around a great idea, but you got to be really professional on that software development side for most of these ideas to be able to be brought into a company and vetted out.
That's great advice. We have another question here from Tim. What parts of the claim process have been ignored by technology or innovation, and why? I think that's to Melissa or Chris from the claim side.
I can start out, and then Chris, you can pipe in. So it's funny you asked that, because that was a similar question I just had on a town hall meeting from all of the claims adjusting staff. And it was more of a challenge, because I think what we have failed to consider, and I am considering it because I've done their job, we require the adjuster to be the data input, right? So they feel like they're becoming a data entry person. And I'm always cautious that, look, I know you guys want a piece of data, you want to capture this, you want that, but let's think about, if we want it, what do we need it for, and how are we going to get it if we didn't have an adjuster? Don't make the adjuster do it, because they have so many other things to do, and we pay them for their brain to do the analysis and actually handle the claim, not be the data entry point. So as we have, continued to move forward as an industry and capture more data and become more technology savvy, have claim platforms, even with some of the integration, we never really thought about where are we getting the data. So as the data comes in, it needs to integrate. I don't care if it's an API, I don't care how it comes in. We got to figure out where to put it and have it all flow in so that the adjuster is not the point of the data, right? And so I think adjusters are very frustrated that we have these great claim platforms, but they feel like they have, ADD of filling in 20 different fields and all of this. And if I don't fill this in, then it goes on my diary, and then I get in trouble, and then I get a bad rating. Like, this is what happens. Like, they feel like they're running around like a hamster in the wheel. So I'm always trying to explain to them, because I feel their pain, because I did it, right? And I understand it. I started down that path, and I'm like, we've got to come up with, how do we get all of this data from Cole, put it in the GCP, plug it into the claim system? How do we get all of that to integrate so the adjuster doesn't have to do it? I want it at the adjuster's fingertips. I want it to show up, not have them put it in. How do we get third-party data to come in? How do we get vendor data to come in? Like, I'm trying to solve for that right now and push all that data in, but it needs to be a two-way street. It's not everything coming out of the claim system into the Google Cloud. I should be having stuff coming out of the Google Cloud, pushing back into the claim system, right? So you got to have that full cycle coming through. But as insurance companies started to develop, they didn't think about that, right? They just thought, oh, let's take what's in the adjuster's head and get it in the system, and then we'll have all this data. Well, I mean, I get it. They do have a lot of information, but we got to come up with better ways, because otherwise you're basically just making them, a data entry person, right? And it's pretty clear, because that's where the frustration's coming from. So I'm trying to figure out how to solve for that, because as you add more technology, do I want adjusters to go into 10 different platforms? No. I want them to go into one platform, one-stop shopping, and everything be there, right? So we have to figure that out so that they continue to do the great work that they do and interact with the customer and do all those things without being the data entry point.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I think one of the biggest areas from my perspective that I think technology has left behind in the industry is actually getting money to the policyholders. I think there's been a big learning curve in the industry of, I can go to the panel right now and through my PayPal account, I can send $10 to you and, in 2 minutes, but I can't necessarily do that with every one of my policyholders. And, there's just different players involved. We aren't necessarily all banks, so we don't know the ins and outs of what's involved. When you have mortgage companies involved on property losses, how do you stroke a check payable to customers and to mortgage companies? So, the industry is responding, and we're working through this. But I think the industry has lagged greatly in that vein. And those tech startups that are learning how to tackle that issue, I think are going to bring us light years ahead.
You should come work with us, Chris. We got real-time payments.
And then I'm gonna twist that question and flip it over to Cole and just say, is there anything that you've uncovered that you're seeing as you're working with carriers that you think are some areas of opportunity, or maybe somewhere that you want to go with Flyreel in the future?
Yeah, definitely. I think I hinted at it a little bit before. I mean, in short, we have this AI assistant that guides homeowners and business owners through scanning their homes for inspections. And what we're now doing is equipping that AI assistant with more skills to hold their hand through filing a claim. And when you do that, the goal is we're trying to make an investment in the carriers to help them de-silo the claims and underwriting data to then do correlation between the two. What we now know is that we'll identify attributes like a Bradford White hot water heater on the second floor that's 12 years old, it's likely to leak. And then 6 months down the line, it leaks. So why aren't we preventing those things? And I think being able to connect the claims outcomes with underwriting attributes, there are just obvious connections there that we haven't had the luxury of making just because of the way data is stored today. So having a single platform that is capturing that data in a consistent way, structuring it the same way so that you can do the relational connections will provide our customers a huge advantage. And that's what we're after. But I also think, coming back to that point about segmentation and more, I think carriers are starting to see that it's all about the value, right? And customers value things differently, right? It's not necessarily that when you buy a car, you want the tires, you want the outcome, right? You want to go from destination A to B, and the tires are just part of that. And I think mobile technology, that's just the avenue to get to the outcome that you're after, which is, I want to know my stuff is covered. I want to know that my carrier is doing their job and I'm a willing participant. The how doesn't really matter nearly as much as the what I'm getting and the value on the other end. And I think that's one of the big realizations that we've had and our customers have had is, I think when we see segmentation, it's not on age for the reasons Greg brought up. It's more on, what do these people value? Do they value speed, or do they value comprehensive personalized coverage more? And then approaching it from that angle. So those are two things that I see in particular in our future, and also the future of our customers.
Thank you. I think we have seen that the industry is moving in a forward direction, and that the way the data is shaping it is a good thing, as long as we learn how to wrangle it and use it for the benefit of our customers. So I think there's a ton of opportunity, as we've seen today, and I want to thank each of our panelists for joining us today. Cole, Chris, Melissa, and Greg, thank you all. For everyone listening, if you'd like to contact any of our speakers, you will see this video recording up on our YouTube. We'll include a contact slide there. And thank you again for joining us, and come check us out next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy.